Time for a review exercise. Let's use this mind map. You do the work, you interrupt your brain from forgetting, and learn the topic better. All right, let's do it. Start with this seed term, loop guard, and I want you to think of every term you can think of and write it down that's related to loop guard. Sometimes you'll think of an idea and you think there might be a term, but you can't think of the term. So in that case, just write as short a description as you can. Make a list. Take at most 2 minutes to do it. Hit pause now and go to it. Next up, I want you to turn that list into a mind map, and here's how you do it. So you start with the seed term somewhere in the center of your page or your mind map app. And any of the terms in your list that you think go together, group them together physically somewhere else in the map. And if there are other terms that go together, put them somewhere else but together. And if there are terms that don't really go with anything else, spread those out. In effect, you're making a map, kind of like what your memory thinks of these terms as far as their relationships and how close they are. Go to it. 2 minutes at most. I'll give you a few seconds to hit pause before I do more. You came up with a list of terms. You made a mind map. Here's my list of terms. They are somewhat alphabetized, starting though with the loop guard seed term. So if you'd like to hit pause and update your mind map to include these terms, great. If you don't, that's fine as well. I will give you one extra this time though. There are some concepts that I think don't quite get reviewed when thinking about the terms. There are a lot of concepts with this topic. So think about this. Could you, in a few words, describe the problem related to loop guard, the underlying cause of that problem, the solution to it, and the location in a design where you would use loop guard? It's just more review, and I'll talk about that after the break. All right, the usual 5 seconds to pause if you'd like to. I'm going to go over my mind map, but remember, it's all about the exercise and you thinking about it and you making a mind map. So if you haven't done it, hit pause and go do it. That's where the real learning happens. So you might learn a few more things listening to me go through my mind map. So you're welcome to listen in. I'm going to start in the middle right and talk about core concepts first. So the big concepts included the idea of a layer 1 problem, that is a unidirectional link that can happen on fiber links, and how a forwarding loop can happen with spanning tree when that unidirectional link occurs. So that's the problem. And then we use spanning tree tools in this broken state to deal with it. So you will have heard terms like the familiar designated port role, root port role, and alternate port role. And those are port roles, but I emphasize in this video this additional concept on the right. So those aren't terms over here, but they're important concepts that designated ports send hellos, but the root and alternate ports do not. They instead expect to receive hellos from designated ports, if you will. All right, so that's important to the underlying logic. Then we talked about some spanning tree states, forwarding and blocking, which are probably familiar, and then this relatively new in terms of the sequence of learning, this broken state that's used by a few features like loop guard, also root guard. In fact, when you're using loop guard, it uses this loop inconsistent substate, if you will, whereas root guard uses the root inconsistent substate. I don't think I mentioned that one in this content video. I'm just mentioning it here now with you in case you're thinking, what's that other term? There it is. Now, I mentioned a few terms, root primary and root secondary in the slides. And those are kind of jargon to refer to this very popular config command that's used to configure one switch to be the absolute best to become the root switch and one second best. And that's a really common way to configure priorities on switches. And then finally at the top, I tend to put a summary slide in these related spanning tree videos that list all these optional spanning tree features over here. So I organize them together in this mind map. All right, so that's the core of the mind map. And I suggested as an extra, hey, not really terminology, but what are the key concepts with loop guard. So the problem is a forwarding loop can occur in certain conditions. And the cause is this unidirectional link plus normal spanning tree operation when that unidirectional link occurs, kind of like those core concepts I mentioned down here. Now, the solution is loop guard, which monitors for this condition and uses the broken state. And it's a very particular condition that we talked through in the content video. But the location is on, quote, never root switches, that is, switches that should never become root, and on ports that should never become designated ports. Enable the feature. If the port attempts to become designated, then it triggers the loop guard feature. All right, yeah, so that's a lot of concept behind all this. And if you're wondering about that, check out the content video. Hopefully you interrupted your brain from forgetting and you'll remember more of the terminology and the ideas here. If you're new and this is your first video, great. Hit subscribe, get notified of new ones. There's lots more here to listen to, but leave me a like and a comment. That helps me a lot. Thanks a bunch, y'all.